the union and Major League Baseball came to an agreement about what the upcoming baseball season is going to look like. And my question is, does Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball owners, do they actually like the sport that they partake in? Because I got to be honest, I can understand the extra inning rule. There's no universal DH. There is no expanded playoffs. That got taken off the table. You're going the extra innings, the similar one that we had last year during that condensed season where you have guys starting on second base. You had 78 extra inning games a year ago in that condensed year, the longest of which went 13 innings. But the one that I really can't stand and that I hate, I could go along with the extra inning one, is I can't stand the 7-inning rule when you're looking at doubleheaders. That's not baseball. I mean, it's just not. And I don't think any way you cut it, and I can understand you got to make an adjustment to the game, but now we're going to run 7-inning doubleheaders, which completely changes the way a game does look like as compared to, 9 innings of baseball and the conventional 27 outs as long as, the game does not go extra innings. And now Major League Baseball, for some reason, has leaned into and loves and adores this 7-inning doubleheader rule, which is, for my money, it's not Major League Baseball. You want to say that's, you want to go down to T-ball or playing, with your kids and my 7-year-old Jackson up here in Stamford, Connecticut, where they're playing 6-inning games? I mean, that's one thing. We're talking about Major League Baseball, and we're going to get 7-inning doubleheaders in 2021. My question to Rob Manfred is, do you actually like the sport or love the sport that you are the commissioner of?
Moose, it's like you think that he wants to put in 7-inning doubleheaders just to beat the traffic or something, or so he doesn't have to stay at the ballpark. See, I found this interesting because it falls under the health and safety umbrella, because when the pandemic, which is still, raging in this country, but when they had the shortened season of 2020, they were looking for ways to minimize your time at the ballpark. Remember, that was a really big thing. So we wanted to, put the man on second in extra innings to try to end these games sooner. And then obviously the 7-inning doubleheaders, because you didn't want people hanging. Remember, you couldn't even shower at the ballpark. I don't know if that's still part of it, but there were all these things about not staying at the ballpark a long time. And to be honest with you, the 7-inning doubleheaders, I kind of liked them, and here's why. It created this sense of urgency with both games, and, sometimes doubleheaders can tend to, sort of drag on. They can be real disruptive to your bullpen because you have to use so many different guys, and it can throw off the rest of the week. And with last year, they had to make so many adjustments with adding doubleheaders because of games that were postponed or rescheduled, that, you want to have some kind of, thinking about the athletes, and the managers and how they're going to try to do workloads and stuff like that through the season. And it was only 60 games. Now we're doing 162. So I like it. I thought it created this urgency where all of a sudden you're in the 5th inning of a doubleheader. It's like, oh my God, what pitching moves are they making? What's going to come down to the wire here? I actually got used to it and really liked it and enjoyed it. And I would imagine just because they have to be so concerned that you're going to have more postponed games this year. And then you're going to have to try to make those games up. And how you're going to do it, it's going to be by more doubleheaders. And think about the players, especially the pitchers, and how this is going to have an impact on their arms and their usage and all of it. So I get it. And it doesn't offend me. I still feel like we're in this gray area of sports where we're just so happy to get sports and to have it back in a, knock on wood, consistent way, that if you have to mess around with a couple rules here and there, I think I'll still give baseball a pass on that one. I don't think it's that they don't care about the sport. I think they're trying to make the sport work.
Well, I understand, but the complexion has completely changed, has it not? There's 3 vaccines that are out there. I mean, the season is, there's stadiums that are opening up as mass vaccination sites for the general public. I mean, we're looking at a completely different moving forward here next 6 or 7 months as compared to what we were looking, hopefully, as compared to what we were looking at, a year ago. That would be, I just hate it. I mean, I just hate it.
But you don't still think that they're going to have postponed games? They have to account for that, right?
Well, but I understand. But then when you can expand the roster, if you're worried about pitcher usage, I get the extra innings that you don't want games going 18, 19 innings, and people get bored by it, and you don't want to see the shortstop coming in to throw in the 20th inning. I understand that.
There's the first time.
There's a certain sexiness to that, because if you're completely locked in as a fan and you watch those games can be quite memorable because it looks like no team is going to be able to find a way to win. And then when you go to the position player to pitch, it does make for some interesting moments in Major League Baseball. But you want to do away with that, and you want to do the extra inning rule where you throw a guy on second base in extras and speed up the process of getting to a finality of the game. That's fine. I just don't love the extra. I don't love the doubleheader rule. And I understand why they're doing it. I think the parameters and the outlook for our country in dealing with COVID-19 is changing on the day with the vaccinations that are out there. We can see light at the end of the tunnel. We could debate about when that tunnel and when we hit that light, whether it be 5, 6 months, whatever it might be, Maggie. But there is some sort of light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccinations that are out there. I just don't like the 7-inning doubleheader rule. I just
the
don't.
only thing about
when
that
came out, and then you don't even have the DH.
Right.
There's no expanded postseason, which you want to make the argument, okay, that's fine. You put more importance on the regular season. And I just, Major League Baseball makes this announcement as they've been, going back and forth with the Players Association, and then they come up with this, which is kind of a hodgepodge mess from my vantage point.
Listen, the DH and the postseason, these aren't health and safety things. These are money things, right? Like, these are collectively bargained, bargaining chips that no one wants to put out there this year in a full year, hopefully 162 or as close as we can get to that. Don't want to put anything out there because they don't want it to set a precedent for some huge labor negotiation that's going to blow all of us away at the end of the year, most likely, right? So I get that. That's not a health and safety thing. That's just a money thing, and that's a bargaining chip thing. For these things, we're still in the cloud, and I think of the fog of the pandemic. Yes, thank God the vaccine is here. Thank God people, I think, want to be vaccinated for the most part and are open to it. But baseball has also said they're not going to perceive to be cutting the line. So we don't know when baseball players are going to get fully vaccinated. So in the meantime, you're going to be traveling. You're going to be, exposing yourself, and everyone's going to be exposed to the virus, and you have this health and safety protocols that you hope will work. But we hope, right? I mean, to say that we don't think there'll be an outbreak on a team, that would be naive at this point because they haven't gotten the vaccine. So if they still want to have these types of measures, and if they think 7-inning doubleheaders will help at all, if they think the man on second rule and extra innings will help at all, speed up these games, get people out of the ballpark, I'll give baseball a pass on this one. We kill baseball all the time. We crush them.
Haven't teams learned after going through what they went through last year, and the Marlins were a number one mess when they decided to handle themselves as a team early on when baseball did resume last year, right? So, and then you saw the webs of that. But haven't these teams and players learned what they need to do and how responsible they need to be to where you can play 9-inning doubleheaders and not 7-inning doubleheaders? You've gone through the experience before. We've seen the examples of players not handling themselves properly on the road in order to play the game, and then having a spread on the team, the Marlins being the example from a year ago. With that experience, do I need now to throw 7-inning doubleheaders back into the mix in 2021 after my league and teams went through it a year ago?
Well, yeah, I mean, you and I are looking at it differently. You're like, what's 4 more innings in a day? And I'm like, why do the 4 more innings if you don't have to, right? And if you still feel like any little bit will help. And I don't know if it will. Listen, the players, they want to play 162 games, so they want to try to get in a full season. You could say, well, is that the safest thing? We don't know. I mean, you could make that argument for basketball, right? These guys made such a, sacrifice having to go into the bubble. They come out. You'd have to think they have great health and safety protocols, and you still had, 25 games have been postponed this NBA season. So even though you can be as good as possible, you can be buttoned up, you can be following every protocol to cross the T, but unfortunately this virus is so catchy, these different strands are catchy, and I think it's an inevitability that unfortunately if you're going to play sports, someone is going to test positive and you could have an outbreak on a team. So I get it. I will not get bent out of shape about this one. I don't think it's going to be a rule from here on out. I think while we're still in this pandemic, I'll give baseball a pass. There's another thing I thought was really interesting was the fact that you had scientists who had to take a look at the baseball, and they are actually going to be changing the baseball this year. So remember, we were all wondering, they're hitting all these home runs. Is something got to be different with the baseball? And Major League Baseball swore up and down, never had to change. Nothing changed. Same that same formula, everything down to the T. Well, it turns out it wasn't. It turns out that the threads on the baseball were actually not the same size. They were elevated or something, and that they thought caused some drag on the baseball, and now they're going to go back and change it, and they think it's going to bring down the home run rate.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that's great that they're going to deaden the baseball just a little bit if you're Major League Baseball, because the home run rate around the sport was getting ridiculous. And we saw it a couple postseasons ago where I do believe, even though Rob Manfred can deny it, they did make an adjustment to the baseball, and you saw a little bit of a dip in the postseason when it comes to the home run rate of playoff teams. Now, I know
I'm surprised you think that because you're a Yankee fan, and the Yankees live on home runs. This is great for the Yankees.
I mean, I get it, but I don't need to see the ridiculous amount of home runs being hit and the way that the game has changed. I don't love the way that the game has changed. I don't love the high amount of strikeouts, the home run rate going up, everyone getting lost in launch angle and everything. I don't think that's good for the sport, where you've seen the great all-around hitter have to make an adjustment to what he does up at the plate, because everyone's caught on, well, what's your launch angle? What's the spin rate off the bat? How big, how many home runs are you hitting? That's really overtaken the game. The power and the strikeout has overtaken Major League Baseball and really has defined it. But it's great that they're going to get it. I hope when a Gary Sanchez fly ball dies on the warning track, you're not thinking the same thing. Well, oh my gosh, if we just had the other baseball, this thing would have been out. I really don't. I'd like to see the game played on the level. I really do. I'm not watching Major League Baseball to see 7, 8, 9, 10 home runs hit over the course of a game, 4 home runs per each team. One other thing about, before we get back to the baseball side, the health and safety protocols, which is, Major League Baseball is going to, with the 7-inning rules and the doubleheaders. Mind you, Major League Baseball wanted to, and their proposal to the Players Association, as they go under this health and safety protocols about what we're dealing with, their proposal to the Players Association was playing 154 games in 166 days, right? Yeah. Right? I mean, so they thought that was going to be good for the player after taking a month or suspending or delaying the start of the Major League Baseball season for a month to play 154 games in 66 days or something like that, right? As compared to 162 in 186 days.
Right.
Which is a discernible difference when you look at Major League Baseball and the players and the wear and tear on the body. That's where I find it kind of ironic. Well, you can't have it both ways, where you might want to say, I want to speed up the game, or I don't like 9-inning doubleheaders. I just don't think it's baseball. That's all. And I think for the owner's side of things, where they're asking the players at one point in time to condense the year. We'll pay you for the 162, but we're going to ask you to play 154 games in a very, very condensed amount of time. So you can't tell me that you're concerned about wear and tear on the players and the wear and tear on the player's body and everything that they're going through if you decided that you wanted to shoehorn 154 games in a short amount of time, and then you come back and you finally come to the agreement, well, 162 and 186 days, but for health and safety protocols, we're going to now play 7-inning doubleheaders. When I look at that, is that not being a legitimate game? I think it's okay when you look at it and say, Maggie, you might be right. You might say, well, you got to adjust to the times, right? I mean, baseball can drag on. It's a little boring. You're trying to connect to the millennial. They want everything now. So maybe you feel like it's a better sport or a more appealing sport to the younger sports fan by saying it's a 7-inning game. But I could look back on it and say, well, I just don't think that's a legitimate game. I don't think if I'm playing 14 innings of baseball in one day between two teams in a doubleheader, I don't look at that as being a legitimate game.
Wait, but I'm saying, I feel like baseball can have a pass because we still are playing during a global pandemic, right? We still are, yes, the vaccine is here and people are getting vaccinated, but it's not fully available, and so we're still in the throes of this thing. So my personal feelings about, the urgency that it creates with 7-inning doubleheaders and how much more quickly they move, that's just my personal view on that. I think baseball is looking at it and saying, we're still in the fog of this thing. So, we can make these changes and adjustments temporarily so that we can say, listen, if there is an easy sort of health and safety measure that we can take, why not take it? Even if it's 2%, 5%, whatever it does maybe helps, then why not do it? Because why not go and try to do as much as you can? The games and stuff like that and the schedule, that's going to be something that, it was a much, much bigger conversation because it had to do with money and compensation, and that becomes something totally different. this is something really about health and safety. And you could look a side eye and say, well, how can they claim that they care about health and safety? To me, it's an easy one. See, like the interesting thing about saying it's not baseball, like, didn't we kind of feel like last year, even though it was 60 games, like we acknowledge that the Dodgers won the World Series, right? We consider them a World Series champ. There are things that we take into consideration because of the pandemic and say, yes, it was 2020, it was weird, but we acknowledge that it was, legitimate for what it was. Like, yeah. I still think that rule applies to 2020. You want to make changes and temporary changes to the game. I'm not going to say that's not baseball, just like I wouldn't look at the Dodgers and say you're not a true World Series champ. I still think you have a grace period here because of the virus if you're baseball.
No, I get it, but I look at the Dodgers as being a true champion because everyone played under the same rules. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to delegitimize what Los Angeles accomplished because everybody in the league in Major League Baseball played under those same rules. So you could compare
as
it
they
to
would this time.
Well, you could compare it to years gone by and say, well, is that just as legitimate as a team that played 162 games? And you can get into a debate and, have a couple beers with your buddies, at the local bar when we open things back up again and let the debate rage on. But I just don't, 7 innings is softball. 7 innings is not Major League Baseball. I mean,
but they played them last year. And
I understand they did it last year, but I look at it as being under... Well, I just look at we're in a completely different parameter. If I go through the experience I went through last year as a league, I'm not flying blind. Mm-hmm. I went through that. I know what I need to do. The outbreaks on teams started to come down as the season did go along, right? I mean, you had the early stuff with the Marlins and the Phillies, and there were other examples around it. But as the league did go on, you did not have the outbreaks that you did. So I went through that as a league and as an experience. So I have that vast experience in my back pocket of what we need to do to remain as safe as we possibly can. We have more information now than we did 8 months ago or 6 months ago when we were approaching this topic. I just don't look at it as being, well, if I'm going to play 162 games, so I've made that decision. I couldn't shorten the year.
Right.
So you're going to mean to tell me now in doubleheaders that I have to condense that from a traditional 18 to now 14, and it goes under the guise of health and safety protocols, even though 7-inning baseball is softball, that's not baseball?
Well, I think it's because they're factoring in the idea that they're going to have postponements of games in a way that is going to be so wildly, more possible than, say, of rain delays and things like that. You're still going to be, potentially we'd be naive to think that there's not going to be postponements, that there could be potential breakouts. Like, until all the baseball players are vaccinated and all the managers and everything, you can't say with certainty that you're not going to have a breakout on a team. Even if you are following the rules, it doesn't eliminate all risk, and baseball would be the first people to tell you that. So I think making sure, like, you look at what happened to the Cardinals last year, they had to play 11 doubleheaders.
No, I get it.
It's wild. So if in the players, that's just like, it's a lot of stress. Even if you do expand the rosters, you're expanding it like we saw with the Marlins. Even though they made the playoffs, a lot of those guys were not Major League Baseball players who happened to be like really punching above their weight class in a short, condensed season. Now you're trying to do a long season, and you have to acknowledge that there could be postponements varying from like the small and inconvenient to like the very large and 10 days, 12 days like we saw with the Cardinals. It's possible it could happen. Even though we know so much more about the virus is mutating. I mean, there's just so much out there. We're still in this thing. And so to me, it did bother me. And then the other side of it is just like the speeding up the game part. That's just me personally. Like, that's nothing about the health and safety. I just kind of thought that created a different sort of aspect to these doubleheaders.
But Major League Baseball also has got a popularity problem.
Well, I don't know if they're going to ever think
that. It's behind the NFL. It's behind the NBA. It's had a precipitous drop in our culture among sports fans. It's become way too regionalized. So if they feel like, that's why we've had the debate about pitch clocks, speeding up the game, having the batter remain in the batter's box, the mound visits, everything that we've talked about, the reliever rule, all of those things that we have discussed and analyzed is, well, let's see if we can make this game in the regular season more watchable, because it's a huge commitment of 162 games. I mean, we're going to be locked in watching the Mets and the Yankees, but that doesn't mean the 22-year-old is going to be locked in and game out because of the length of some of the way that these games are played and the length that the games go on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like when you say it's not real baseball to have 7 inning doubleheaders, I'm just like, this isn't real life yet. We're not back yet. And
Yeah,
I know in some places in the country it feels like you're back, like you watch the people partying in Tampa after the Super Bowl, and it doesn't look like there's any kind of virus that's happening there or any fear of it. But, like, life's not back to normal yet. Life's not real. If baseball has to make some changes and alter it, I'm okay with it, and they would have my blessing on it. I don't think it's a front to the game.
Yeah, I just don't look at it as, I get the extra innings. That's fine. I don't love the 7-inning doubleheaders.